let's talk about curiosity today. It's important. It plays such a huge role in our bravery, both the big and the small kinds of bravery. Someone estranged from their own curiosity, I've noticed, ends up feeling trapped, victimized by their own situation. They can't have that new sense of perspective that gives them their freedom. Regaining your sense of curiosity is a huge help for those moments of, why is this happening to me? Which happens to all of us. So this is why I am so pleased to introduce you to Laura Coe, who is a life coach and an author of the book called Emotional Obesity. And she's host of the podcast, Art of Authenticity. Not only do I love spreading love for other podcasts out there who are killing it these days, by the way, but Laura, because of her experiences, she has some really poignant perspectives on the subject of authenticity and putting yourself out there. Even while working in corporate healthcare, Laura Coe always specialized in breaking down complex concepts to make them really easy to digest and understand and apply to life. So now she channels that really unique skill into translating philosophy and ancient wisdom and breaking down that monumental, life-changing wisdom in a way that everyone can apply to their own lives. So today, she and I cover the topics of how to integrate curiosity into your intuition, how to build your intuition, and why our internal curiosity is a great place to start. Also talk about how to define a full body yes and what to do with the gray areas of life. We also chat about the line between authentic and inauthentic, how to find it. So Laura has a really handy tool, which she mentions at the end of the show, and you'll want to get your hands on that. The link to all of that and all of Laura's stuff is in the show notes for today's episode at barenakedbravery.com. Go ahead and visit that. And with that, I give you the lovely Laura Coe, my new BFF. You're listening to Bare Naked Bravery, a weekly podcast hosted by me, Emily Ann Peterson. As a singer-songwriter, author, teaching artist, and creative entrepreneur, I encounter some really fascinating stories. I'm on a mission to reveal the depth and width of bravery and its benefits to creatives like yourself. More than ever today, our world needs bravery, unique bravery, from everyone. This is the place where you find it. There is no script or censorship today because that's how these facets of Bare Naked Bravery are in real life. So if you're listening with little ears nearby, please know that some episodes may contain mature language and subject matter. One of the easiest ways you can share bravery with the world is to send this episode to a friend or two. Send them an email, text, or tweet. Tag them in one of my Instagram posts. My handle is Emily Ann Pete. Or leave us a review on iTunes. It takes seconds and can be done from your phone right now. Again, we need more bravery in the world. So let's be brave together. Laura Coe, thank you for being here with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's exciting to chat with you.
I know. I'm excited for this. I was just reading, before we started talking, I was just reading your latest Huffington Post article on what it really means to be curious and how to build curiosity into your life.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm excited to start there. But let me ask you this one question first. What has bravery looked like this week for you specifically?
Oh, this week. It's a great question. I think of bravery very specifically, but I think bravery is waking up every day and being aligned with your purpose and having the willingness to follow that intuition despite potentially what the mental noise in your head would suggest otherwise, like, just don't get out of bed or other people will think or fears or whatever judgments. So to me, bravery every week, this week included, is following my intuition, believing in my truth, taking steps towards it. Specifically, I'm thinking about a new book, and that certainly requires an insane amount of bravery to explore. But yeah.
But I think that So I started with that question before we dove into curiosity, because I think that intuition really requires a keen amount of curiosity.
Yes. Yes. I think that curiosity is a funny conversation because we think of it typically in terms of being curious about education or information or knowledge. And it's great to be curious. I'm curious about some information. I'm going to go on Google. I'm going to research it. I'm going to find out about it. I'm going to learn something. But curious of oneself is really what I find interesting. And I think that takes a lot of bravery because it is very hard to turn inward, be curious as if you were talking about a topic that you just found interesting instead of internalizing all of the information you find and taking it personally and going down a rabbit hole of like judgments and, oh my God, I'm not good enough and I'm a mess and everybody else has it together. So how do you find curiosity of oneself with some level of objectivity and self-compassion and self-love? It's tough, I think, for most people.
Yeah, I think it takes a lot of practice too.
Yes, a lot of practice and a lot of compassion that we're all in this together. Everybody is turning inward and hearing a lot of mental noises that are negative, and you're not the only person. There's a lot of shame in it, right? Like, I'm the only one walking around beating myself up, and oh my God, if I turn inward, I always play this game, but if I took a tape recorder and I implanted it in your head without telling you last night, and I've been recording your thoughts for 24 hours. And I now have this recorder unknowingly of everything you've been thinking. And I'm going to play it for everybody you know and love right now on loudspeakers. People are like, oh my God, no, that's the worst thing ever, right? Because most of us, if we turn that lens inward, a lot of the things we're thinking are pretty messed up. But we're all experiencing that, right? So I think the first step is kind of having that compassion and awareness. It's not you, it's something weird about our brains. I think it's almost some like mental disorder that our brains just come with, that we just ramble negatively along, and that you don't have to take it all to be true. It's just, a lot of it is nonsense.
Way early in the Bare Naked Bravery days, we interviewed Dr. Friesen from Canada, and he's a sports psychologist. And when we were talking about like, what do you do when you're on the bathroom floor moments, or when you have those crazy thoughts like you're talking about come through, his suggestion is to acknowledge them as being real, not to just go, oh my gosh, I shouldn't think that, but to open your brain up and acknowledge that those things are real, but also go, I wonder where that came from.
Yeah, it's that curiosity. It's that space, that objectivity. It's real, but it's only a thought. I mean, it's real. It is true. You're having a thought, but they're not always important. It's like the wind blowing. They just come and go, and we take so seriously, I'm thinking it. So yes, it's real in that you are having the thought and you shouldn't run from it. And I think that's what he was suggesting. Most of us just stuff it down and run until it gets louder and louder and louder and louder, and then we have to deal with it. So it's a real thing, but it doesn't mean it's true, and it doesn't mean you have to take it seriously, and it doesn't mean you're a bad person, and it doesn't mean you have to take action, right? It's just there's thoughts. And so look at them and think about, be curious. What does that mean? Where does that come from? Do I want to take action? Check in with your intuition. How do I really feel about that, right? So I'm thinking, I'm visualizing, but what do I feel? Integrate all of it, right? And so you can kind of get to an answer. Oh, I'm just in a bad mood today. I'm going to ignore that. That's right. A perfectly good choice. Or, you know what? That's the 15th time I felt that way having coffee with that friend of mine. I think there's something here I need to like explore, right? So, yeah.
Do you find that the curiosity that informs your intuition, does it give a certain role usually to someone's intuition?
The curiosity, does it have a role for our intuition?
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%, because our intuition is not verbal. It is a sense, right? It's this, and it's a quiet little sense, right? Like it's not loud. Our brains are loud. They're like kicking our ass all day long. Sorry if I'm not supposed to swear. They're yelling all the time. our intuition, it's quiet. It's a sense. It's the back of the neck hairs coming up. It's that gut sense, right? You feel it. It's subtle. And yes, when it gets loud and you feel full on anxiety, I don't think that's intuition anymore. I think that's just like, oh my God, I've missed the intuition moment. Like I'm now in a state of panic. But that subtle intuition, that weird sense, it's quiet. So being curious, taking the time to investigate. Okay, I'm having a thought. The thought is this coffee with my friend is not going well again. And I seem to be sitting here listening to her and she's just negative again. What am I doing here? Check in with yourself. Oh, I feel guilty. I feel responsible. I feel that this friend of mine needs me. What's going on with you that you're feeling that way? Do you really feel that way? What's your intuition telling you? I need out of this friendship, like, okay, trust that, right? Like that's good information. And when I started doing this, when I started getting very curious without judgment, it was just life-changing because the wisdom that you need to make the ultimate decision in your life, it's sitting right there. It's sitting right in front of you. The pro and con list is great. We want to analyze. We want to use these big brains. We want to go back and forth with ourselves. Other people, fantastic. Get some help. People add value in our lives. That's also fantastic. But at some point when it's time to make micro decisions, do I want to eat pizza for dinner or a salad? Do I want to make macro decisions? What do I want to do with my career? It comes down to this sense of deep intuition. And so what I would say to people listening is try it on the really tiny stuff, get curious about the little things, the low stakes things. People try this curiosity, objectivity, check in, tune in. On the big stuff, what do I want to do with my whole life? And then it's like this downward spiral. It's too much, right? It's like, I want to start jogging. I'm going to start with an ultra marathon that's 80 miles. That's crazy. Don't ask yourself those questions. Start with, do I want a mocha latte today or just a coffee? Like, what do I really want? And I know that sounds funny, but like, really, like, what do you want, right? Like, what is your deeper truth about this moment? Can you drop the judgment? Can you drop the guilt? Can you drop the shame? Can you just be in your truth for just an hour?
I know I went through a season a couple months at the end of last year where I had two questions I kind of ran to every time I thought about it, which it was, am I doing this the most efficient way? And then if so, is this what I really want to do?
Right. I mean,
because my personality type is like, let's be the most efficient. Let's maximize down to everything from I need to run 3 errands. So I would map out which was the most efficient route to go run those 3 errands around town. And it's really unnecessary amount of mental energy into let's just run 3 errands and relieving myself to go, which one do I want to do first? Not just which one do I have to do first, but which one do I want to do first?
Yeah, you're incorporating the feelings of your life into that incredible brain that is so logical and powerful. And that's awesome. You've been given this gift that your brain is mapping out and can plan all this stuff and it's taken over the show. And you know what? In a pinch, when you're busy, that's fantastic. When you've got to get it done, I'm sure you can crank, right? Like you're somebody who can just crank it out. Yeah. But sometimes life is not just about what our big brains do, right? Like there's a lot of stuff that is personal to us. And it is like this override switch that just flips on and it takes over and it isn't always accurate. It just is information. So how do you sort through all that information, filter down to what makes you happy, what makes you feel fulfilled? That comes from, bringing these modalities together, the thoughts, the conversations, and the feelings.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know you work a lot with other people on this kind of stuff, one-on-ones and groups too, right? I imagine.
I don't do too many groups. No, I write and do the podcast on the group level, but no, I do mostly one-on-one.
So please, by all means, do not break any codes or privacy with this question, but have you had anyone that you've worked with who has had some really great results or a journey through this curiosity that we're talking about?
Yeah. we're specifically calling it curiosity right now, but this is like really what I'm interested in. And 100%, I worked with somebody for a while, a woman who every time she would think to do anything, she would feel mired down with, I should be doing it. Other people, it's like, I should be writing, I should be going to the gym. Everything in her mind was just so overwhelming. And the noise was so loud that she couldn't even enjoy the things that she actually loved, like sitting down and reading a book. And she actually likes it. So creating that space, getting some objectivity, getting out of the mental noise of her head was the very first step. And within, 2 weeks or so, we had hey, we just got to get you doing things that make you happy again. We just want to practice what works for you this week and do that. And then notice, like, the guilt comes up, notice that you think you should be doing it, but just start to become aware. Just because that tape is playing doesn't mean you have to continue letting it roll. Those unconscious conversations are happening all day long. And if we don't pay attention to them, then roll the tape back and then do otherwise, it never ends. So, 2 weeks later, she's like, I went out dancing and I did all these fun things. She was so happy, I mean, she came to me because she was thinking about her career, but we had to start with these basic, how to speak your truth. How do you say what you really want to say without feeling uncomfortable, or other people won't approve of you, or judging yourself, it's not good enough, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I mean, that's one example, but I mean, really, this one guy is very funny who I work with, but he talks about the matrix, the moment where you take the pill. I can never remember if it's like the blue one or the red, which one you take, but whichever one it was, he's like, I feel like you gave me the pill. Like, I can only see my truth now. Right. Like, and sometimes he's like, sometimes I'm like, I want to go back and take the other pill. Like, just living in the lie, it's sort of easier in certain ways because you can justify and rationalize decisions that don't make you that happy, but it is easy in certain ways. It's just hard in the long term of your life. But that's a joke of his. He now literally is trying to become a coach. He's just living his dream. He's gone from a relationship and a job that was unsuccessful to really feeling like every day feels authentic and good to him.
So authenticity is your big behemoth of a topic that you work around with people, which I know to be a big part of being brave is honesty is the first. So recap for everyone who's new to the podcast, who hasn't heard me say this a million times. My thesis for bravery is that you have 3 main ingredients: vulnerability, improvisation, and imagination. And in order to have vulnerability, you have to be honest, which is a big, huge part of being authentic, is saying what you really mean to say and not trying to fake it, or even like fighting that sense of imposter syndrome along with that. So how do you find vulnerability playing a role in authenticity?
Yeah, I mean, you're spot on. It's like, I don't want to say the cart and the horse or something, but they're completely related, right? Like right. It's hard to have one without the other, because to be authentic is to be vulnerable. You can be authentic with yourself, and that takes a certain amount of courage and work to just reconnect to it. I mean, I think the biggest step in a process to become authentic, and to those people who aren't familiar with my work or haven't thought too hard about the word authenticity, it came up for me because I was living a life that was highly successful. I had sold a company. I walked away from a massive, massive job in a $4 billion business to go find something authentic. And as crazy as that sounds, that was the only intention I had. I was like, I just need something that feels more authentic. And I didn't even know what the hell I was talking about at the time. But it was, what I think at the time I didn't get was, there's a way in which the world around you can look really great, but you're not feeling as great as the world would perceive you. So I had sold a company, I have the house, I've got the life, everything looked great, except I was a basket case. And so I felt like, what's going on here? The missing piece is me. But when I went to go find myself after living rather inauthentically for a while, I found that to be very challenging. So finding your authentic voice, finding your truth, being able to reconnect to it when you haven't done it in a long time is part one. And then to your point, vulnerability. Oh my God, is this going to be good enough? What will people say? It's very easy to be inauthentic because you can just make yourself fit into some model wherever you find yourself. I was in the healthcare tech industry, which is crazy because philosophy and yoga is my passion in life. But I just made myself work in that space, right? And I spoke the language and I hung out with the people. I just never felt like, it was my world. It never quite made sense to me. But you get all those approvals, right? You get all that like external validation. And I was successful. That was the worst part. If it was falling apart and I was a failure, well, at least, okay, I got to get out of here. This isn't right for me. But a lot of people find success in inauthentic ways. So finding that vulnerability to speak your truth and then share that with others, letting people know this is truly your passion. Fear becomes intolerable for most people at that point, right? That if somebody doesn't accept my truth, right, I think I'm going to die. Like really, people feel, that serious about it. So I think getting past that fear and recognizing you won't die and that other people's approvals are not what this is about and that this is really your journey is the solution.
Oh, yes. The authenticity that's required to put yourself out there as a creative is, you have to recreate your authenticity every day. Every time you write a song, every time you paint something, every time you write a blog, or every time you write a poem, or every time you write an email, you have to recreate this authenticity. And for someone like me, and I know several of our listeners too, who value authenticity at such a high priority, how do you not feel so exhausted in your pursuits for authenticity?
That's a great question. So I use the metaphor of workouts. My book was called Emotional Obesity, and the idea was the weight of our thoughts, eventually weighs us down and we become layered up. Our authentic voice becomes layered up and it gets harder and harder to connect. And the solution in my mind is like emotional workouts and emotional fitness. And I use that metaphor because everybody understands that. If you go out and you run a marathon, you start day one getting around the block. You're not going to get a marathon done the first day. And so it is tiring at first because at first you're changing a lot of patterns. You're rewiring the way you're viewing the world. You're shifting your perspective. You're letting go. But over a very short period of time, particularly if you get somebody to help, I always feel like I don't mean you need to call me per se, but I just find coaching for myself and for my clients, it just helps so much. Just like a personal trainer can get you there a lot faster. You could certainly do it yourself as well, but it's a little harder to figure out. I did it myself. I don't suggest that. It was grueling, but over time, you get fit. And so finding my authentic voice now is like second nature. I wake up and I check in. It's just something I'm doing all the time. And I can feel now when I'm doing something inauthentic, it's like visceral. Whereas before, when I was trying to do something authentic, it felt uncomfortable. like I was so used to being inauthentic that the authentic moments were like, whoa, what's happening? And now it's the opposite, right? So I really, look, life is complicated. You have to do certain things. Sometimes you do things you don't want to do it. There's a ton of things I still don't want to do. I run a podcast. I don't necessarily love every step in the process. I'm not suggesting that authenticity means I always get what I want. It's just, I'm aware that I don't like those pieces. I still love doing my podcast. It's what I want to be doing. That's authentic to me. It's not about my pleasure in every step of that podcast. It's that this is aligned. This is what I want to be doing. And so when you feel that way on a regular basis, it's so addictive and it gets so easy and your mind starts unconsciously doing it for you. So, the brain patterns really quickly. It becomes your default system. And, when I say yes to that coffee now that I don't want to go to, or, the things that I really don't want to do that I just really don't want to do and there's no reason to, I'm so aware of it. And it's just really hard for me to say yes in those moments. Somebody came on my show who said full body yes. And I loved that. Like, she doesn't do anything anymore unless it's a full body yes. And I'm like, that's right. Like, if I'm not head to toe, like, yes. And again, like I said, it doesn't mean there aren't little pieces that are difficult. It's not about avoiding struggle. I just don't do it anymore. It's just off the list for me.
I'm writing down the words full body yes, because I think that's great too.
Yeah.
Before we get back to the conversation, I want to remind you that there is an extremely cool group of fellow podcast listeners and brave souls who are waiting for you. Yes, we have started a Facebook group for Bare Naked Bravery, and your first task as a member of the Bare Naked Bravery community is to introduce yourself. There are musicians, visual artists, moms, dads, business owners, writers, community builders, and even previous guests of the show already diving into the fun. And they're making their unique introductions to the group. So folks are sharing big and small ways they've been brave in the last season, day or week. They're sharing pictures, they're sharing links, and I'm excited to see more photos of everyone's brave moments and shout outs when we witness someone else in the group doing something courageous. I don't know why we waited so long to get this going, but I do know that we are waiting for you to join us. So when you log into Facebook next, just search for Bare Naked Bravery and we should pop right up. We would love to see you there. So in a previous version of my career, I was a cello teacher. And oftentimes I would get students who, this is like a normal learning curve for any beginning cellist or string instrument that uses a bow. Crossing strings between, going from one string to another was always a little bit of a hiccup, right? And it shows up in every student in a different way. But the way to, if you're playing through a song and you're hitting strings you shouldn't be hitting and bumping up against other strings and hearing squeaky sounds that drive you batty, usually the trick is there's this exercise where you play on one string and slowly touch with your bow the other string at the same time. And what you're doing is you're physically teaching yourself the exact boundary between the two strings, as opposed to thinking them as these like nebulous areas where your bow should or shouldn't be. You're teaching yourself the exact location of the boundary. And I find that doing that with your comfort zone, and it sounds like with your authenticity, you can do the same thing too. You're basically spending time learning where that boundary is of what is authentic, what is inauthentic, where is my comfort zone, where is not my comfort zone.
Yes. I love that. That's beautiful. And that's I call my podcast The Art of Authenticity, because I thought, I'll clear all the clutter of my head and I'm going to be authentic and that's it. I'll have gotten there and I'm done. But to your point, it's like a constant kind of subtle finding that space, that nuance, and it's different from me to you. So it's so highly personal. You can't really go out on the internet or look at a friend, to give you that answer. And it shifts, right? I mean, some days it feels different than others, and some years, and definitely, every 5-10 years that shifts a lot. I'm 45. What was deeply meaningful to me in my 20s is not true in my 40s. And so it's an art, and you're always, I don't play an instrument, but the great artists, they're always working on that craft. You don't ever hit the great actor. It's like they can say the same lines every single night and they're noticing the little nuanced ways of how they might have spoken. It's the same thing. Your authentic self, you just get more and more access to it. You get more and more comfortable with it, and it's shifting around. Some days it's really available. Some days it's not. Sometimes you have to wait for it. Sometimes it's I was trying to decide what to do next last summer, and I just kept checking in. I was like, this is so irritating. Like, this is like nothing, right? And I'm like, come on, give me something to work with. My brain was like ready to go, but I just, whatever was in front of me wasn't quite right yet, And so there's patience to it. So there's a whole long list of things. And I think your metaphor is really beautiful. And it's finding that space in between the mind and the soul and articulating it in the ways that you can, which is, it's good luck. Carl Jung says it's a privilege of a lifetime to find out who you really are. I think it's an endless journey, which is a wonderful process to be in.
Mm-hmm, I agree. And I think the reality of that exercise that I told you about, and the reality of any of the applications that we just mentioned, is that when you spend time in the gray area between authenticity, inauthenticity, comfort zone, outside of your comfort zone, one string on an instrument versus another string on an instrument, that gray area shrinks the more time you spend in the gray area.
Yes. Well, you get comfortable with I think Americans need to always get there, right? They need to like climb the mountain and like, I'm going to climb the mountain of my career and have success. And it's like, I think what I hear you saying, the gray area gets smaller. It's like, there's no spot. It's not finished, right? Like what happens the minute you finish a project, you start another one, right? Like,
and the gray area keeps shrinking infinitely.
Right, exactly. It's not like there's a dot where you're like, there it is, So, right. I mean, I think it's we're asking ourselves the wrong question. I want to find happiness as if I will put a flag in the ground and there it will be. Happiness in the way we think about it in our culture is often the pleasure points of life. And so those are fleeting. So that's the worst plan ever, to chase after that, because it's like, oh my God, that latte is gone. I need to go buy shoes, right? Like those are pleasure hits. And to be in the process and the journey towards something is our life, right? There's no getting there. And this was, look, I say this very humbly. I sold a company and I was like, that's going to be it. Like I will have arrived. I will feel a certain way. The reality is that, there was a nice download of money and I was able to buy things which are wonderful. I'm not going to lie. Like it's nice to have a nice sweater and I loved getting my new car when I went out and did that, but they're fleeting. And so there you are still under that sweater. You haven't changed. So that, that approach, it covers one element of your life. You have success, you have financial security, which is wonderful, but the other part, how to be happy, how to be content, how to ultimately feel good in your own skin, walking around grounded, feeling like, right, your feet are solid on the ground. I think that's what we crave more, and we don't talk about that much.
I wholeheartedly agree. Wholeheartedly agree. So tell us a little bit more about what it was like to come to this conclusion of, I might be getting the order mixed up. So you sold the business because you were feeling itchy about getting out of there, or did the business selling happen and then you realized?
It was like the straw that broke the camel's back for me. I was a philosophy undergrad and graduate student. I was deeply passionate. I didn't want to teach in a university, and I just, it was the 90s. There was it's so embarrassing. There was no Google. You couldn't go Google search like other alternatives with a philosophy degree. And now there's so much in this space, but I didn't know what to do. I had this opportunity and I jumped on it because it made a lot of sense. And it was great for a while. I loved building this business, but it was never quite my thing. Like particularly the topic we were talking about, kidney stone prevention. I'm just like, this is not my topic. This is not what I care about. And so it was all fine until it wasn't fine. And it wasn't particularly selling the company. It was that I'm a builder and a creative. And so I was able to exercise that muscle in creating a business. I prefer to create in the philosophical world and all this stuff, but it did check that box for me. I was enjoying creatively building up this business. When it was built, I started feeling like, what am I doing? I'm just running this business. I don't want to run a business. I don't like business. And then we sold it and I became part of this $4 billion business. And I was like, in meetings, and I had a 2-year earnout. It's like bureaucracy. And, I never had an assistant because I didn't really understand it, needing an assistant. I walked to the fax machine. I could fax things. But when we sold our company, I was like, oh my God, you have to fax it 16 times and take notes and then like tell HR that the person didn't reply. It was a disaster for me. So what was not a great fit became intolerable. And that voice that there's something else for me. I have a deeper calling. I have something else that I really need to do with my life got louder and louder and louder until I found myself on an airplane with my brother. And I'm not a crier. I'm more like the type that gets a little frustrated in life. And I just like broke into tears. I was like, I can't do, what am I doing? I just like had a complete meltdown. I was like, this is, I got to think of something else. But I had been doing this since I was 24 and I was now 35 or 6. And, it was very daunting to make that change. Even with people think, oh my God, please, you had money. Yes, but I had no idea how and what, and like I had no idea what to do with my life. And it was a very, overwhelming experience to reorganize yourself at that age.
What is it about airplanes and airports that
brings out these wholehearted experiences?
I have had many moments on airplanes where I have like the big, great aha moments. And I know I'm not the only one because obviously you just said it, but I also know of specific other moments on airplanes that are these big, like, and I wrote the book in 5 hours.
Maybe you're away and far up high and you're just like getting space. I don't know. Yeah.
So funny. Well, I think, your story about you basically invested a ton of energy and emotion into this business, and people do that in their own careers that they love. And when it turns around that their investment is not giving back to them like they thought it was going to, that's a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. And I interview people on this podcast all the time that are the opposite, right? They feel like what they're doing is really aligned with who they are. And I think it happens more often. School tells us, hey, take these classes and then go in the world and get a job. And most people follow a formulaic subscription to like, this is how to do it. But it's fine if you want to be a doctor and that's really a calling. But if you want to do something that's not really obvious, how do you figure out what that looks like? And I think it's a real challenge. We're not taught life design in school. And there you are with all this knowledge, and the school systems have filled you up with great information. But who I am and what I want to do and how do I want to approach life, not just in career, right? Like what kind of relationship, what kind of lifestyle do I want? Those are big questions that we should be asking through the school systems. It's really a travesty. And I think it leaves a lot of people in positions where they're downstream. I say I'm sort of like a midlife crisis manager. Like, they wake up and they're like, this wasn't it. Or I'm trying to prevent a midlife crisis, right? Like I work with people who, that's really fun. They haven't organized all sorts of things in the wrong direction for themselves. And so we can get them on track younger, but it's just not part of our culture, right? It's just get out there, make a living, do something, right? Pay your bills.
Here's the equation, go follow it. And I think curiosity, to come full circle with curiosity, I think curiosity plays a role in picking apart that equation for how to live life and recognizing that, oh, wow, 5 times 2 is 10, but so is 2 times 5. And there's a whole bunch of other iterations of the way to get the same thing, or even a different thing if you want a different thing in life. And that curiosity is a tool to help you pick apart what you want.
Yeah. And who we are and what makes us, tick. And it's so sad because I have an 11-year-old. We were all born being able to do this, and the systems like kick it out of us. I mean, it is so sad because he knows exactly what he wants. I mean, they're so honest that you're often telling them like, whoa, dude, take it down. You can't just say you hate the dinner grandma made. That's rude, like they're just so honest and real and like, no, I don't. And yes, I get it. Like that's not going to work in the quote real world. And you have to understand the consequences of things and how long things take. And dedication and hard work are not necessarily what kids do perfectly, but their honest, true voice, their belief in what makes them happy, they know, right? Like I joke with my son sometimes when he was little and I'd say, do you like pizza? He loves pizza. He's like, yeah. I'm like, are you sure you like pizza? And he's like, yes. And I'm like, come on, you don't really like pizza. And kids, like, the more you joke with them, the louder and bigger and like bolder they get. They're like, I love pizza. Whereas adults, like, you start to question something in their life and they crumble, right? They're like, why, is there something wrong? Should I not like it? Like, does Sarah not like it? So learning to navigate that truth again, it's always been there. It was yours. It was your God-given gift. Just reconnecting to it though, and feeling the right to it, and then making it work in the real world, right? Like that to me is the secret sauce.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So for final question, for someone who is diving into their curiosity and how that plays a role in their authenticity, what would be one takeaway that they could do, or question that they could ask, or a habit, or?
Yeah, really easy. So if you're just starting off and if you have the courage, if you have the bravery, if you have the willingness to even try, like, first of all, it's amazing, right? Like, give yourself just the biggest high five already. I talk about celebrating the wins, but I'm a huge fan. Just like, you don't have to open champagne, but just have a moment of pride, just a little one. And then when you turn inward, notice the judgment. Like, the number one thing is that internal critic wants to just start rambling away. It's okay. Let him or her talk. Give him or her a name. Oh, there goes nervous Nelly talking away. But just be an observer. See how much space you can place between you and the narratives in your head. You may be thinking a lot of things that are not, you're a little embarrassed about. It's not like it's negative. It's not very nice to other people. It's not the point. The point is to be able to have the courage to sit and listen. These are the thoughts going on in your head. They're okay. There's nothing right or wrong about them. Just stand back, listen, and start to notice the patterns. If you could get a pen out, write down the 10th, mostly you guys, like, you're not thinking 30 things, you're repeating a handful of points. And they're either around not deserving or judgment or anger or resentment. You can go to my website. I have a scale out of frustration. I feel like you can weigh yourself to find out what's going on with you physically, but how do you figure out emotionally? I created an emotional scale. It takes all these topics. You can find out which one is kind of your go-to. I love savory wings when I'm going to gorge on something. Like, some people love chocolate. I'm totally safe with chocolate. So write down the things that you're saying and see if you can catch the pattern. Is it shame? Is it self-doubt? Is it, what is it? And if you're struggling to notice what the pattern is with those thoughts, hop over, try the scale, see if that helps. And from there, you can start to take steps to shift your perspective away from what I call junk food thoughts over to more nutritional ones, because, we want to treat ourselves with self-love and compassion and all of that. And it's not as easy as just like yelling at yourself, like, be compassionate. It's like, I want to be grateful today. It's a little bit of a process, but that's the first step. And it really gets you going.
That's fantastic advice. First. Second, this has been such a joy to have you on the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. This is so much fun. Your questions are amazing.
Well, thank you. Your brave takeaway from today's show is to follow Laura's advice. In an effort to integrate more curiosity into your life, I want you to first take a moment of pride and then observe your judgment and notice the patterns. If you need an extra leg up and a helping hand with that, Laura's got a series of questions to help you measure this and take the next step. And the download for that is in the show notes for today's episode. Go to barenakedbravery.com, type in Laura Coe. Coe is spelled C-O-E, and you'll find a link for emotional obesity and all of her other contact information in the show notes. I know that Laura and I would love to hear all about your favorite parts of today's Bare Naked Bravery. You can chat about it with the other Bare Naked Bravery community members in the Facebook group. just go to Facebook and type in Bare Naked Bravery. Otherwise, you can find Laura Coe and myself on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and all the other places. Go ahead and tag us so we can cheer you on if you share the episode with your peeps, so that we can cheer you on and say, yay, awesome. That is our show this week. Thank you again for listening. I know that there's a lot of things that you could be listening to today, and I don't take it lightly that you have chosen this podcast and this conversation to listen to. So if you are curious about joining the community, again, there is an open door for you. We would love to have you a part of it. So go to barenakedbravery.com to learn more information about all of that. And if you want to spread the bravery and make it just resonate throughout the whole world, then go ahead and share it with all your friends. The show really does rely on the third element of bravery that I talk about, which is resonant bravery, that secondhand bravery. When we see something inspiring, we need to share it with our people. So if this has inspired you, then I encourage you to share it with the people who you think would be inspired by it as well. So beyond that, if you are digging the music in today's episode, that is because it's brought to you by my friends at Music Box Licensing, good old pals, a premier creative music agency dedicated to finding and crafting unique soundtracks. To find out more about all the artists, musicians, and other sponsors of the show, I encourage you to go to barenakedbravery.com/sponsors. I am so looking forward to being with you later on this week. We have some super cool things in store for you. Until then, I have one message for you. It is this: be yourself, be vulnerable, be improvisational, be imaginative, be brave, because the world needs more of your bare naked bravery.